Welcome to Short Movie Channel. The movie begins with a girl named Elieen. She's 24 years old and works as an employee at a prison. From her behavior, it's clear that she's shy, introverted, and scared of getting into relationships with people. She dedicates her whole life to her job and her father, nothing else. One day, we see her at work, and it's obvious she has a crush on one of the prison guards. She wishes she could talk to him, but she doesn't have the courage to confess her feelings because she's terrified of rejection. After work, Elieen heads to a bar to get a bottle of eyeliner, and by coincidence, she runs into an officer who used to be her father's colleague. She greets him, and he asks how her father is doing. Elieen smiles and tells him he's doing fine. We find out that Elieen's father is a retired officer who fell into deep depression after leaving his job and turned to alcohol. He constantly causes trouble with the neighbors. Later, Elieen gets into her car to head home. When she arrives, she sees her father arguing with the officer in the street. She quickly gets out, apologizes to the officer, and takes her father inside. Once they're home, Elieen argues with her father because he always causes problems when he's drunk. She begs him to drink less because he keeps putting her in embarrassing situations. But he just mocks her for not being married yet, and compares her to her married sister. He tells her she should take care of her looks and dress better, reminding her that she's a woman. Of course, Elieen is hurt by his words because he doesn't appreciate all the effort she puts in for him. She doesn't even have time to care for herself. The next day at work, Elieen sees a beautiful woman walking into the prison and finds out she's the new psychiatrist for the inmates. Her name is Rebecca. A little later, all the prison staff have a meeting to get to know Rebecca. Elieen sits quietly, not engaging much with the others. But when the meeting ends, Rebecca approaches her, introduces herself, and chats with her. Elieen is thrilled that someone finally noticed her and actually wants to talk to her. That same day, the prison hosts a small Christmas party for the inmates. But it doesn't last long. Just like always, the inmates start a fight and ruin everything. That night, Elieen gets home, and her father notices she's unusually happy. He asks her why, and she tells him she met someone really nice today. Then she asks how his day went. He says it was boring, like always. Elieen asks him to tell her about the most unusual case he dealt with back when he worked at the prison. He tells her that once, he and his co-workers arrested a boy named Paul, who had killed his father in his sleep. To this day, no one knows why he did it. He says Paul's father was a well-loved officer. What's strange is that Paul didn't try to run or even deny what he did. He just sat at the crime scene until the police came and arrested him. After some investigation, it was found that Paul had mental health issues, so they placed him in a special cell. Her father tells her that Paul is now in the same prison where she works. We see Elieen watching Paul in his cell. She becomes curious about his personality and grabs his file to read it. But before she can, Rebecca interrupts and asks what she's doing. Elieen explains she just wanted to know more about Paul. Rebecca tells her that Paul's case is one of the hardest and most dangerous she's ever dealt with, and that it's nearly impossible to understand his personality easily. The next day, Paul's mother arrives at the prison to visit him. It's obvious she's nervous and scared. We learn that Rebecca had called her and encouraged her to visit Paul, hoping it would help his mental state. Then we see Rebecca and Paul's mother sitting down to talk to Paul. But after just a few minutes, his mother loses control, curses at him, and storms out. Rebecca decides to continue Paul's therapy session in her office. She tells the guard not to come in so Paul can feel more comfortable opening up. Meanwhile, Elieen gets curious about what Rebecca and Paul are talking about. She knocks on Rebecca's office door, pretending she left her notebook inside. Rebecca thanks her but doesn't let her in. Instead, she suggests they hang out later since she doesn't have any friends and needs someone to talk to. Elieen is excited to finally have a friend, so she agrees. After work, we see Elieen getting ready for the outing. That night, she meets Rebecca at a bar. They have a couple of drinks together. Rebecca asks if she's ever been married. Elieen says she's never been in a relationship because she's scared of getting into one and having it fail. Rebecca says they're complete opposites. She's been in lots of relationships, but they never last long because she only wants to have a good time. When she gets bored of someone, she just moves on to the next. Rebecca then asks about Ellen's family. Ellen says she lives alone with her father since her mom died years ago from an illness. Rebecca feels bad for her and says they have a lot in common. She, too, was an orphan and raised by her uncle. Then Ellen asks her about her treatment plan with Paul. Rebecca tells her that she once met a professor at Harvard University, and this professor conducted a strange experiment on prisoners. The idea was to make them take drugs so they would confess all the feelings inside them. The strange thing is that this experiment worked on a lot of people. This is currently what Rebecca plans to do with Paul, and she tells Ellen that she feels very sympathetic toward Paul because many children grow up in difficult family environments, and the circumstances around them push them to commit crimes. Then, Rebecca starts dancing with Ellen, and they're both having a great time. But suddenly, a drunk man approaches and tries to harass them. Quickly, Rebecca hits him and knocks him to the ground. Ellen is shocked by her actions because she never had the courage to do something like that. She feels very happy because it's the first time in her life she has had a friend. A little later, Rebecca says goodbye to Ellen and heads back home, while Ellen goes off to drink alone until she gets drunk and falls asleep. The next morning, Ellen wakes up and writes that she slept in her car all night and feels very tired because of all the alcohol she consumed. Then, she goes to knock on the window at home for her father to open the door, but he is upset with her because she stayed out all night. He refuses to let her in. Ellen keeps trying to open the window until she succeeds and enters the house. She writes that her father took the car key from her while she was asleep to punish her. She asks him to give it back because she's late for work, but he refuses and gets mad at her. He throws her a book on the floor about the struggles of the poor and homeless, telling her to read it all so she can understand her mistake and never repeat it again. Ellen apologizes for what she did and promises not to repeat it, but he tells her that many people would love to have a place to sleep in, yet she doesn't appreciate the blessing she has. He also scolds her for making a mistake with a guy while she was drunk. Of course, Ellen can't keep her calm anymore, and they argue because he's blaming her for an unintentional mistake, even though it's the first time she's ever made a mistake in her life. A little later, Ellen goes out to clean the car, and a police officer comes up to her, saying that the neighbors have filed a complaint because her dad scares their kids with the gun he has. Ellen is shocked and has no words to respond. Later, they both go inside, and the officer takes the gun from her father and gives it to Ellen to hide. After a while, Ellen arrives at work and asks the employees if Rebecca has come in, but they tell her that she's on vacation for the holidays. Ellen gets very upset because she's going to be alone again and spends the whole day in Rebecca's office. At night, when she returns home, she finds her father missing. She searches for him until she finds him collapsed on the ground, bleeding. She rushes him to the car to take him to the hospital. On the way, Ellen's father imagines that her mother is sitting next to him and begins to harass Ellen. She's shocked by his behavior because he always acts this way when he's drunk. A little while later, they arrive at the hospital, and the doctor tells Ellen that her father hurt himself when he fell because the alcohol level in his blood is too high. He also says that his liver is severely enlarged and that he's at risk of dying at any moment. Then they go back home, and Ellen tells him what the doctor said, asking him to stop drinking and take better care of his health. But her father doesn't care about her words. He starts drinking again and asks Ellen to drink with him too. Ellen feels she has to listen to him because she knows the psychological state he's going through. Her father notices that she's wearing her mother's jacket and says he bought it for her mother after she left the psychiatric hospital, hoping to cheer her up and make her forget the pain. He also tells her that he loved her mother very much, even though everyone blamed him for her mental illness. But none of those people knew the real nature of their relationship to judge them. On the second day, we see Ellen asleep in the bathtub, arguing with her father. She's done with his issues, and then Ellen wakes up to the sound of her father saying that a woman named Rebecca wants to speak with her. Ellen quickly gets out of the bathroom and talks to Rebecca on the phone, who invites her to spend the day with her at her house. Ellen is very excited and agrees to the invitation. At night, Ellen arrives at Rebecca's house and gives her a gift for Christmas. Rebecca thanks her for her kindness and tells her that she feels lonely during the Christmas holiday and couldn't think of anyone better to spend it with. Ellen is thrilled because Rebecca is starting to consider her a close friend. Ellen asks Rebecca why she lives alone, even though she hates being alone, and Rebecca responds that sometimes being alone can be helpful because it clears your mind and allows you to act freely without anyone controlling you. Ellen says she's very lucky because she often wishes she could live alone, so she can act freely without being watched by anyone. Ellen then tells Rebecca about her life, mentioning that she didn't finish college, so she couldn't get a good job. Rebecca tells her that she's very smart and is sure that her future will be bright. After a while, Ellen excuses herself and goes to the bathroom. When she comes out, she notices that Rebecca has prepared dinner for her. Ellen notices that Rebecca is very nervous and asks her what's wrong. Rebecca explains that she's different from other people when it comes to her patients, and she wants to confess something big to Ellen but is scared that she won't be able to keep this secret. Ellen reassures her and asks her to speak. Rebecca admits that this isn't her house, but they're in Paul's apartment, and she attacked Paul's mother and tied her up in the basement. When Ellen hears this, she starts running toward the door to escape, but Rebecca stops her and asks her to calm down and listen to her. Rebecca explains that she found out Paul confessed to her that his father used to bother him, and his mother knew about it but never tried to stop him. So, Rebecca decided to visit Paul's mother and tell her what Paul had said. But Paul's mother lost her temper and attacked Rebecca, and she would have killed her if Rebecca hadn't sedated her and tied her up in the basement until she found a solution. When Ellen hears this story, she sympathizes with Rebecca and asks her how she can help. Rebecca says they need to make Paul's mother confess in front of them. Ellen decides to take her father's gun from the car to force her to confess. Then they both go down to the basement, and Rebecca approaches Paul's mother and asks her to confess calmly because she wants to help her and her son. Rebecca reassures her that she won't hurt her, but Paul's mother refuses to speak and continues to curse her, threatening to send her to jail. At this point, Ellen intervenes and tells Paul's mother that she might kill her and let her body rot in the basement, and no one will ever find her. Paul's mother smiles and says she's not afraid of her, continuing to insult Ellen and threaten her with her drug-addicted and failed father. Ellen raises the gun and threatens to kill her if she doesn't confess right away. Eventually, Paul's mother admits the truth and says she discovered her husband would leave the bed at night and go to her son's room. At first, she thought he was just checking on him, but later she found out he was molesting him. And when she saw this, she froze and couldn't do anything because she was afraid to reveal the truth. Everyone loves her husband, and no one would believe her. She didn't want to ruin her husband's reputation or damage their home, so she chose to remain silent. When Ellen hears this, she can't control her anger and shoots Paul's mother in the shoulder. She screams loudly, and Ellen and Rebecca quickly sedate her and gag her until she dies. As Rebecca realizes what they've done, she breaks down crying and asks Ellen why she shot Paul's mother. Ellen cries and tells her she didn't mean to, but she lost control because of her silence about harming her son. Ellen asks her not to tell anyone and assures her that she has a plan to move Paul's mother's body to her father's house and place the gun next to her to frame her father for the crime. Rebecca is shocked by how easily Ellen is willing to sacrifice her father for the sake of Rebecca, and Ellen responds that she believes her father is the reason for her misery, and he deserves to suffer. They agree to run away to New York after they finish their plan. They then move the body to the car, and Rebecca tells Ellen that she needs to go back to Paul's house to cover up all the evidence. She asks Ellen to leave the body in her house, and she'll come back after she's done. After a while, Ellen arrives at her house and parks the car containing the body in front of the house. She goes inside to collect all her money, preparing to escape with Rebecca. She waits a long time, but Rebecca doesn't show up. Ellen realizes that she's running away alone and that Rebecca won't return, so she decides to change the plan. She takes the car and stops it in a remote area in the forest, where there's no reason to continue sacrificing her father for Rebecca. Then, Ellen exits the car and walks down the highway, stops the car, and gets in with the driver, escaping alone. The movie ends at this point. If you enjoyed the movie, hit the like button and leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.